When Mitt Romney lost in 2012, there was very little discussion of blame. Everyone assumed Romney simply lost because he didn't do a good enough job of convincing voters to punch the ballot for him. He didn't debate Obama properly. He didn't stand up to Candy Crowley. He backed off the Benghazi issue or botched it completely. He gratuitously insulted 47% of Americans. Romney lost, Republicans generally believed, because Romney deserved to lose, even if he deserved to win morally. That's not so for Donald Trump. Never has a presidential candidate had so many ready-made excuses for his mess of a campaign. Since the primaries, Trump's defenders have justified every single gaffe by saying, well, he's just a businessman. His anti-conservative heresies have been excused with a wave of the hand and a comment of, well, conservatism has never accomplished anything anyway. His general ignorance with regard to basic issues has been shrugged away. He's learning. His general unpopularity has been attributed, not to his own narcissistic nastiness, but to an unnamed group of conspirators out to get him. Sometimes it's the evil cuck-never-Trumpers like me, hiding in their holes, waiting to strike him down at any moment. Sometimes it's the Machiavellian establishment seeking to crush this supposed change agent. Sometimes it's a suspiciously defective earpiece forcing him to go soft on David Duke and the KKK. Now, after his airplane vomit bag of a debate performance, a performance in which he spent the first 30 minutes bloodying Hillary Clinton, only to revert to insecure, incoherent defenses of birtherism, his business record, and his Iraq War opposition, Trump has a whole new set of excuses. First, Trump's defenders attack his microphone. Yep, his microphone. According to Trump, some nefarious conspiracy took place to sabotage his weapon of mass instruction, throwing him off his game, which seems both implausible and kind of irrelevant. More realistically, Trump's defenders point out correctly that debate moderator Lester Holt hit Trump far harder than he hit Clinton, which is true. Holt interrupted Trump way more frequently, although in Holt's defense, Trump bulldozed both him and Clinton routinely. Holt asked Trump about birtherism and his Iraq War opposition and his IRS records and his mean comments about Clinton's look. He didn't ask Hillary about the Clinton Foundation or Benghazi, and he asked her zero follow-up questions about her private email server. Holt clearly did do Clinton's dirty work. Here's the question. So what? Trump has known the entire campaign the media would target him. He said so before every debate. He had the opportunity, every opportunity, to swivel and hit both Clinton and the media, and he failed to do so. That's on him. This entire campaign, in the end, is on him. It's nobody's fault but Trump's. He spends the morning after the debate complaining about the Miss Universe contestant gaining too much weight. It's nobody's fault but Trump's. He ignored hitting Clinton over the Clinton Foundation so he could massage his own feelings over his prior business bankruptcies. Trump is the candidate, gang. It's time for those who defend him to own it. If they don't, if they keep allowing Trump to get away with excusing all of his failures by blaming somebody else, they'll be paving the way to his defeat. Losers whine about the playing conditions and the referees all the time. Winners change their game plans. Those who whine for Trump won't be helping him win. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Alrighty, tons to get to here on The Ben Shapiro Show today. In just a moment, we will be joined by the guy who I think is the foremost public intellectual in the United States, Professor Thomas Sowell, who'll be joining us momentarily. First, got to say hello to our friends over at Birch Gold. If you're looking to invest in precious metals in some of your portfolio, not all of it, of course, some of it should be in precious metals, you need to talk to our friends at birchgold.com/Ben. It's BIRCH gold.com/Ben. Make sure you add the /Ben so they know we sent you. You can also call them at 800-496-6663, and they can help you. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. They're the people I trust with precious metals investment. They have a comprehensive 16-page kit, a free information kit on physical precious metals, including how you could move your IRA or 401k out of stocks and bonds into precious metals if that's something you're interested in. Ask all your questions, get all your answers, and then when you're ready to invest in precious metals, talk to my friends over at birchgold.com/Ben, 800-496-6663. So in just a moment, we'll be having Thomas Sowell on the program. Could not be more excited about that. It's obviously an honor to be joined by Professor Sowell. We're also going to be discussing in short order the idiotic attacks that the Trump campaign has been hit with over Alicia Machado, who is this Miss Universe contestant. There are 1,000 holes in this story for the Democrats, and it's hypocrisy of the highest order from Hillary Clinton. We will also be talking about more debate reactions from the left and the right and what Trump can do differently next time. Plus, we have an epic Things I Hate coming up in Bible Talk. So it's a big show today. Lots to talk about. Guys, do we have Professor Sowell already? Professor Sowell, thanks so much for joining the Ben Shapiro Show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a tremendous honor. Obviously, I've read, I think, all of your books, if not, then nearly all of them. And the newest one is the newest edition of Wealth, Poverty, and Politics, which I think is a deeply, deeply important work. So, Professor Sowell, the basic principles of wealth, poverty, and politics, you talk about the fact that income inequality exists all over the world, and yet politicians make their living basically pledging to alleviate income inequality in ways that do no such thing. Do you think, number one, that income inequality, as generally expressed, is a big problem in society?
In some societies it is. I don't think that standard of living equalities are nearly as large as income equalities, because in these data, they leave out billions of dollars of government transfers, which are taken largely from the top of the income scale and given to people at the bottom. So that the actual living conditions are quite a lot less unequal than the data would suggest.
And yet then politicians like to make hay out of the income inequality issue by suggesting people at the top are somehow exploiting people at the bottom. And I want to ask you more about inequality in a second, but I want to start with sort of the presidential debate and what appears to be now the number one economic issue in these presidential debates, which is the fact that no one has ever read your book, Basic Economics, so nobody understands how free trade works. So you have Donald Trump saying that NAFTA is the worst trade deal in the history of the world, and you have Hillary Clinton saying, yeah, it was great back in the 90s, but now I decided it's bad. Can you explain to people simply, because they're stupid, why it is that free trade is not bad and Donald Trump's idea of trade wars are really foolhardy?
First on NAFTA, the hard data show that, in fact, unemployment in the United States declined substantially in the years following the NAFTA agreement. That was true in Canada as well. As regards trade deficit differences, one of the great disasters in the history of this country was the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, based on the same ideas that Trump is talking about, namely that if we somehow stop imports, then our own domestic workers will then have more jobs and so on. People never seem to think beyond the immediate things that are in their mind. They act as if the rest of the world are just blocks of wood. Of course, the rest of the world reacted to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs by setting up their own tariffs. And so worldwide international trade declined drastically throughout the 1930s. And so everyone was worse off than they were before. We had, instead of having the trade deficits that people complain about today, we had trade surpluses all during the Great Depression. That should give us some idea of what wonderful things to expect from trade surplus.
And I also wanted to ask you about, Donald Trump makes a big point about currency manipulation. He says the Chinese are inflating their currency or deflating their currency, and because they're moving their currency up and down, they're really destroying us on trade. This always seems to me such a weird argument. If inflating your currency were that successful, Venezuela and the Weimar Republic would have been absolute economic powerhouses. But I'm wondering why people put so much focus on currency manipulation. Is there any truth to the idea that China manipulating its currency hurts us economically?
Oh, I'm sure that somebody is hurt by it somewhere, but that's true in all international trade, whether it's with or without currency manipulation, that there will always be people who lose jobs as a result of foreign competitors. At the same time, we gain jobs because of free trade. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans working today for foreign companies such as Toyota or Nissan and others who have their plants in America. So it's by no means clear that we're worse off because some jobs go abroad if the ones that come in are either larger in number or else better paying.
We're speaking with Professor Thomas Sowell. His book is Wealth, Poverty, and Politics, among many of his other fantastic books, including Basic Economics, which is the primer that everybody should read if they're first getting interested in economics. Professor Sowell, obviously a lot of the swing states in this particular election cycle, places like Ohio, like Pennsylvania, these are places that used to have much more heavy manufacturing base, and a lot of those jobs have left. Donald Trump is trying to appeal to those people. So is Hillary Clinton. Have we reached the end of the point in politics? Do you think that there's going to be a resurgence at any point of the free trade mentality? Because the polls seem to be moving heavily against free trade because it's so easy to look at sort of the targeted losses of free trade as opposed to the widespread gains.
That's prediction, which is very hazardous for economists. But I think in the long run, common sense does tend to assert itself. But a lot of dire things can happen before that comes along. It's wrong to talk about bringing back jobs that have left. Many jobs have left because of counterproductive political policies, particularly in places like Detroit. You notice that when foreign automobile manufacturers come to the United States, they don't come to Detroit, where there's already a workforce that used to work in the big three auto plants. They go elsewhere because the policies in Detroit have driven all kinds of businesses, domestic as well as foreign, out of the country.
And I also wanted to ask you, Professor, about another issue just with regard to trade and protectionism. Both candidates keep citing trade deficits as though trade deficits mean anything. And you've written extensively about the fact that trade deficits can exist in good economies and bad economies. Should we care about trade deficits?
No. That's the easiest question of all. As I mentioned earlier, we had a trade surplus for the entire decade of the 1930s, and that didn't do anything to get us out of the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to ask you also, Professor Sowell, about some of the racial issues that have cropped up in this campaign, because you've written extensively about, in your book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, you've written extensively about some of the problems that are really plaguing the black community, where they come from. And this has obviously cropped up recently because we've had riots in Ferguson and now riots in Charlotte. And Hillary Clinton attributes all of this to institutional racism and what she calls implicit bias. Is there any truth to that? And if not, what are the solutions that people should be pursuing in inner city black communities?
First of all, the big question is whether what they're asserting is true. And the answer is it is not true, because there was more poverty in 1950, let's say, and more racism than today. And yet you did not have riots in the 1950s such as we have today. The murder rate went down among black males in the 1940s and again in the 1950s. And it went up, it shot up in the 1960s when all these brilliant ideas on the left became ascendant. And so you had this huge increase in black male homicide rates that wiped out all the progress of the 40s and 50s. The factual record is what they don't want to talk about. They want to talk about their theories and dogmas.
And because they want to talk about their theories and dogmas, it seems to be very successful in the black community. Do you think that that's a factor of two generations of government dependence, or is that more a factor of just the natural human tendency to look for an outside force that's to blame for the failures inside your own community?
Both. Moreover, it's not peculiar to the United States or to blacks. The very same phenomenon can be seen among lower-class whites in England, where there have been riots which are almost identical to the riots in Ferguson and Baltimore, right down to the rioters setting fire to police cars. And it's the very same thing. It's the notion that other people who are better off got that way by taking advantage of you, and that you have no hope, and that the system is rigged. One of the phrases that constantly drives me crazy, I never hear people explain just how it was rigged. When they talk about economic matters, for example, they say the rich have rigged the system. Well, my research shows that in 2015, the 400 richest people in the world lost an aggregate of $19 billion. If this was rigging the system, it was a very incompetent job of doing it.
Now, the book is Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. And Professor Sowell, you haven't, I'm still not sure where you're coming down in this election cycle. I'm not voting for either candidate because neither one of them meets my standard for basic human beings to be even breathing air sometimes, but mostly just to be holding office. Obviously I want them to live, but the idea here is that, my view is that neither candidate meets a basic standard. Do you view this as a lesser of two evils election, as some people like Mark Levin have claimed? Do you see this more as we're screwed either way we go, so there's no reason to participate on the presidential level? How do you come down on this?
Well, my preference would be to leave the office vacant for 4 years and hope for better things in 2016. Unfortunately, that's not one of the options that we have. I think it's going to be dangerous, not merely bad, if either of them becomes president. The question is, where is the danger greatest, and more importantly, the most long-lasting? And I think that even though Donald Trump has no coherent vision that looks that promising, Hillary Clinton does have a coherent vision. And it's a world in which she can, by determining who's on the next Supreme Court, for the next 50 years, law in America can be undermined. The First and Second Amendments we can write off if she's allowed to put a majority on that court. And so long after, whether it's Clinton or Trump, long after they leave office, the people they put on the Supreme Court will be a legacy for the next generation, and perhaps the end of constitutional law in this country. And on that basis, I would vote against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and that's a logic I definitely hear. My counter logic, just to not vote at all, has basically been what I fear is that Donald Trump is doing a great job of perverting conservatism, and we're watching as many so-called conservative thought leaders have been shifting the very definition of conservatism to meet Trump. So suddenly a bunch of people who used to be pro-free trade, for example, are embracing the protectionism of Donald Trump. A bunch of people who wanted entitlement reform are now pretending that it's okay that he wants to expand entitlements. And so the only hope for the country, which is a true small government movement, is being quashed in order to gain the temporary gain of having him prevent Hillary Clinton from the White House.
I suspect that those positions will be as temporary as the Trump administration, and so I don't think that the ideas are going to go away. I mean, Jimmy Carter followed policies that appalled conservatives, but that didn't prevent Ronald Reagan from being elected after him.
Absolutely. So the book is Wealth, Poverty, and Politics. Professor Thomas Sowell is the guest. Final question for you, Professor Sowell. You obviously work at Stanford University. Young people have a bizarre and outsized love for Bernie Sanders, who may or may not be the insane clown who we've been seeing cropping up in the woods in Florida, Ohio, and Virginia. But how do you deal with the rising support for socialism among kids who don't even know what socialism really is?
Well, fortunately, I don't do any teaching, and so I don't deal with the academic world at all, which is the ideal situation as far as I'm concerned.
That definitely helps. So the book, again, Wealth, Poverty, and Politics by Thomas Sowell, the foremost public intellectual, as I say, in the United States. Professor Sowell, it's a real honor to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So that's cool stuff, gang. Okay, well, Professor Sowell is again, the book is Wealth, Poverty, and Politics, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Terrific, terrific book. Okay, so quick time out so that we can say hello to our other advertiser today, and that is Trunk Club. So you may have noticed over the past couple of years that I'm dressing better. And that's only because I've been told that I have to dress better because I used to dress like a homeless person. Well, if you don't know anything about clothes, if you don't know what fits you, if you don't know what looks good, you need to go to trunkclub.com/Ben. And what you do is you type in your measurements and you share the kind of clothes that you like and you dislike, and they actually give you, as part of the package, your very own personal stylist, somebody you can text back and forth. They'll mix and match clothes from your closet and help you come up with really good items. And then they'll send you, when you request it, a trunk of clothes that you can try on, and if you like them, you keep them, and if you don't, then you send them back to them. They also have clubhouses, and I've been to one of these places in LA. It's super cool. They actually have a stylist sit with you, and they bring out tailored clothes, and they try it all on with you. I mean, it's like you're a celebrity. It's really neat. And these Trunk Club clubhouses exist in Dallas and New York and LA and Chicago or DC, but you don't need that. If you're living anywhere in the country, you can have a personal stylist who texts with you. It's all very user-friendly. They help you pick clothes. It's for men and women now. It's top-of-the-line clothes. We're talking about stuff that you'd get, from in very expensive fashion. You'd get this stuff at a Bloomingdale's or a Nordstrom, and Trunk Club has all of the top-of-the-line clothes. They make sure everything fits. They do tailoring for free, by the way, if you buy stuff through them. You can even tailor outside items with them if you want to send your clothes to them. It's trunkclub.com/Ben. That's trunkclub.com/Ben. 80 top brands. They ship them to your door. You never have to leave home. It's a really, really cool thing. I couldn't be a bigger fan of the work that they do. In fact, when I went there, they gave me, some free money to try it out, and I ended up spending significantly more than they gave me just because their clothes are so nice and their service is so neat. So trunkclub.com/Ben and use the /Ben so they know that we sent you. Okay, on to the news of the day. So let's talk about the desperation that is setting in among Democrats. So Donald Trump performs really poorly in the debate. As I said yesterday, the first 30 minutes, he destroys Hillary Clinton. The next 60 minutes, he basically falls apart. But you can still see that the Democrats are not comfortable. Hillary's looking more comfortable out there, but they're now bringing out, they're finally beginning to scrape the bottom of the barrel. So first, the desperation. President Obama is very upset that people are thinking about voting third party. Hillary can't break 45% in a lot of polls now because so many people are looking at Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. President Obama is out there raving about this. Here's the president.
If there's one message I want to deliver to everybody, if you don't vote, that's a vote for Trump.
Wow.
If you don't vote, that's a vote for Trump. If you vote for a third-party candidate who's got no chance to win, that's a vote for Trump.
Alrighty, so he's making the same argument that people on the right side of the aisle argue about people like me. If you vote third party, then it's a vote in favor of Donald Trump because it's not a vote in favor of Hillary Clinton. They're trying to convince Gary Johnson voters, many of whom are Democrats, to come back into the fold and vote for Hillary Clinton. We'll get in a moment to more of the Democrats' desperation, plus what I think is the big issue of the day, Hillary rolling out the sexism argument. You knew it was coming, and now we finally hit it, and it's really stupid, and it's really bad, and I'll explain why at dailywire.com. If you subscribe there, $8 a month, annual subscription gets you a free copy of Andrew Klavan's new book, which is really cool. It's a good book. We're going to have him on tomorrow to talk about the book and why I, as a Jew, don't have tremendous objections to the book itself, even though it's about the conversion experience of an ethnic Jew to Christianity. We'll talk about that. And so dailywire.com to subscribe. Lots more coming up today. If you go there, then you get to be part of the mailbag. You get free copy of Drew's book. If you subscribe, then you'll get if you get an annual subscription, then you'll get a free copy of my novel when that comes out in a couple of weeks, which is exciting. And obviously, you can watch the show live as we continue in the next 30 seconds. If not, check us out later on iTunes and SoundCloud, the #1 conservative podcast in America, and we're proud to be that.